Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gillian Mahon, and I'm chair of the RDS Vision 2030 series. I'd like to welcome you all today to our first in-person event in over 2.5 years in the series here. The theme of this autumn series centres on sustainability, and today's discussion in financing Ireland's transition to a green economy is part of that wider focus. So today we're going to look at finance as a key enabler and the role that private, public and international financing initiatives can help in supporting the delivery of the change that's required to meet our climate objectives. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Sean O'Rourke, our well-known and respected journalist and one of Ireland's most experienced broadcasters, who will host this series of sustainability events over the course of the next couple of months. Joining him today is the expert panel representing private, public and international financing initiatives in the areas of sustainability. So I'd like to welcome Cathy Bryce, Managing Director, AIB Capital Markets, Emma Jane Joyce, Sustainability Lead in the National Treasury Management Agency, and Stephen Nolan, Managing Director for the UN Development Project in Financial Centres for Sustainability. So in order to ensure that we have plenty of time for the discussion and for some questions from the floor, I'd like to hand over to Sean O'Rourke today. Thank you.
Gillian, thank you so much. There are not many things I would claim to be good at, but I think I'm good at making things end on time, because I spent a lot of time listening to Joe Duffy's producer berating me for, if you like, coming close to the edge. So you will be out of here by 9 o'clock. In the meantime, I thought it would be no harm to start by quoting a tweet from my former colleague and dear friend Charlie Bird that he put up last night. He said, "I am pulling my hair out today for the people of Pakistan. In 2005, I spent weeks there covering an earthquake which killed over 80,000 souls. I never forget the images that I witnessed, and today the people there are suffering another catastrophe. I wish I had a voice." Charlie will always have a voice, but it's part of the backdrop, it's part of the context to our conversation here this morning. And we've, as we know, I mean, it could be Pakistan we're talking about, we could be talking about California, we could be talking about Southern Europe seeing the effects of climate change. We have that intensifying climate crisis. We also have, and this is, I suppose, the thing that really has hit us so hard this year in the last 6 to 8 months, a massive escalation in the cost of hydrocarbons, which, if you like, is a consequence of the massive human misery and drama of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So the time is very appropriate, the subject is very appropriate, and rather than me introducing our speakers, I thought it would be best if I asked them to introduce themselves, because they do have key roles to play, key insights. So maybe I might start with yourself, Stephen, and what you do with the UN.
Great. Thank you very much, and thank you to Gillian for inviting me here today, and obviously Paul for supporting us in making the day. So my name is Stephen Nolan. I recognise a lot of people in the room. I see Tom Arnold, a long-standing friend, obviously Mark and other colleagues. So with the UN, I'm part of the UN Development Programme, which is the largest UN agency. Akram Steiner is the chief administrator there, and he's number 3 in the UN system. And within that, we've got 170 offices around the world, 17,000 staff, and an annual budget of circa 5 billion. Sustainable finance or climate finance or the financing of the SDGs is a big part of what we do, as you can imagine, Sean.
SDGs being?
There's Sustainable Development Goals, of which there are 17, and Emma Jane's got the badge that she's wearing right now, and there may be a few people in the room that are wearing the badge, but it's one of the few frameworks globally, Sean, that people can actually look to and say, well, what are our targets? With regard to Pakistan, I've got 2 of my team at Pakistan. That's where they're based, that's where they're living. Thankfully, they're not within the zones, but it's horrific what they've been telling me and what's been going on there. So within the UNDP, I oversee 3 initiatives. The Financial Centres for Sustainability, which Gillian already mentioned, that represents 80% of the global capital markets. The Sustainable Insurance Forum, which is 36 insurance regulators, and they regulate 92% of the global insurance market. And then the Asian Pacific Sustainable Finance Development Network, which is a platform for the 21 finance ministers across the Asia Pacific, which is Australia, Singapore, into the US, Canada, and so on. There are 6 global initiatives in sustainable finance, big ones. My tree, and then the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action, which Minister Donoghue sits on. the network of green the financial system, which the central bank sits on, and then my colleagues oversee the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group. So on a daily basis, Sean, I work with 70, 80 different countries, ministers of finance, regulators, and market actors on sustainable finance.
Okay, I'll come back to you later maybe and ask you, do you wield a big stick, or is it just about persuasion in the job we do? But Emma Jane Joyce, you are Manager of Sustainability with the NTMA. Tell me about that.
Yeah, thanks. So thanks, Sean, and thanks, Gillian, for inviting me here this morning. So I was appointed earlier this year to lead on sustainability and climate action for the NTMA, the National Treasury Management Agency. And prior to that, I was investment director and head of responsible investment for many years within the Ireland Strategic Investment Fund, and even joined that fund in its previous, or joined the NTMA even prior to the ISIF when it was the NPRF, the National Pensions Reserve Fund. So I've had most of my career within the agency. But maybe just to give a quick bit of background, I suppose my exposure to sustainability started quite a long time ago. NPRF was one of the founding signatories of the UN Principles for Responsible Investment, and sustainability and responsible investment has been part of how the NTMA has invested through its fund arm for many years, and obviously how we do that has developed and grown, I suppose as the industry and approach has. So in my new role, I suppose I'm essentially doing what I did within ISIF for the whole of the organisation, just really focused on embedding climate action, sustainability, but there's a specific focus on climate action into all our business decisions, the mandates we deliver for government, making sure that the corporate functions or the corporate services support the delivery of sustainability and climate action. And also probably the third pillar, how I look at it, is really about people, culture and values, and ensuring that as an organisation we I suppose walk the talk, and that our views on sustainability aren't just in our mandates, but also in the staff and how we go about our business.
And Cathy Bryce, you are Managing Director of AIB Capital Markets. So how does that position fit in? It sounds like you've got a great deal of influence where sustainability is concerned. So tell me about what you do.
Thanks, Sean, and look, thanks everyone for getting up so early to listen to us. So I suppose I have two primary roles within the organisation. First of all is to lead on the business and corporate division, and sustainability is one of our 5 strategic pillars within AIB. So in the business and corporate side, we are very much engaging with customers to encourage them and to support them on their sustainability journey. That includes things like specific products around sustainability. We've got our corporate customers, a very significant portion of them now are actually availing of sustainability-linked loans, where there are specific measures of how they can move their organisation in a positive manner, and they get a small discount on their loan for doing so. We're obviously trying to broaden that out across our real estate sectors, across our broader business community. My other role is to sit on the Group Sustainability Committee, which looks at how the organisation as a whole is moving positively in this whole area, and that encompasses quite a breadth of activities, Sean. It would be how are we sustainable in terms of our physical operation within AIB, in terms of our energy usage, etc. How are we encouraging our suppliers to also operate in a sustainable manner and setting goals and targets for them. It involves our whole risk measurement within the organisation, and our regulator is encouraging us greatly in this direction. Of course, we would have been doing it anyway, but that's to look at our loan book and assess the amount of risk that there might be for companies or consumers who are exposed to risk around sustainability over time. And it's around products, and obviously on our retail division, which deals with consumers, it's to come up with products that are really encouraging, things like green mortgages, things like personal loans, green loans, to encourage people to invest, to refurb their properties or whatever it is. Yeah.
Stephen, as we were saying earlier, the context is at the present time the massive crisis where energy is concerned, and also what's happening in Russia now. We know that there are big objectives like zero carbon by 2050 to get halfway there, at least in this country, by 2030. Does what's going on, particularly in Eastern Europe and the consequences and the fallout from it, does it make the achievement of those objectives more urgent, or is it likely, what I'm saying is it likely that we'll be moving faster towards achieving them or delaying?
Perhaps it's a mixture. If you recall to the last financial crisis, the whole climate finance agenda was really taken off. And actually that got delayed because of that financial crisis. It stopped. It shuddered. A lot of things shuddered, but it really shuddered. And then it took a while again. 2015 was a key one, the Paris COP, or the COP in Paris. I think this time around, Sean, what's quite interesting is that you have your own, everything's going to stop, we need to get back into fossil fuels, we need to increase that. But there's also recognition that that has to be done. It has to be done for the short term, because fundamentally it's about people, heat, livelihoods, and there's a recognition around that. You then throw in an emerging debt crisis at a global level. Sri Lanka's just tipped. We can see other countries are going to tip as well. You look at inflation, look at low cost of living and so on. So we're at that perfect storm. But within that, there's a recognition that this will pass, but the sustainable finance or climate finance agenda, the train has left the station, and it will actually use this now as an accelerator, I believe, as do my colleagues around the world, what we do, to really now move forward into deploying more capital into alternative energy support infrastructure, the type of things that Cathy just mentioned. So it is that point, unlike 2008, 2009, like Genie Mac, I had to pause. It's now Genie Mac, we need to double down on this, okay? In the short term, yes, but in the medium to long term, we need to actually get these products and services out to finance more of this activity. So that's what we're seeing, Sean, at a global level.
Emma Jane, coming back to NTMA, I mean, you've got your own, I won't say freshly minted, but relatively recently established policy on climate change, embracing the whole organisation. Just what are the main points of that?
Yeah, thanks, John. So one of my first, I suppose, deliverables in the new role was to work through the NTMA's climate action strategy. And it's worth saying as well, it wasn't starting from scratch. There's really been a lot of work going on in the different parts of the organisation for many years, and really my role is sort of bringing a lot of it together. But there was, I suppose, for an organisation like NTMA, we have two key objectives as part of our climate action strategy, and that is, I suppose, firstly, to continue to lead on sustainable finance. I talked about sort of our history as a sustainable and responsible investor. This has been something that we've been doing for many years. And the second is to become, I suppose, a sustainable and environmental organisation ourselves in terms about how, both in terms of what we do and how we do it. And we've distilled our climate strategy down into sort of 4 key goals that reflect the need to act now. Like Stephen has talked about the urgency, in terms of climate, and the 4 goals neatly spell need, which helps me on a panel like this. So the first one being net zero. As I mentioned, we want to be a sustainable organisation and a net zero organisation by 2030. This is sort of driving all business decisions. That is something that our board is very, very focused on. The second is about embedding and integrating sustainability and climate action into all our business decisions. That is part of the conversation, that is not happening just in, I suppose, certain teams around the building, but actually permeating, kind of all relevant conversations. The third is about engagement, and obviously there's no point in trying to drive this. You can't do it on your own. You need to be engaged with, for us at the public sector, parts of the public sector, parts of the private sector, our external colleagues all around the place. There's always been a great network on the sustainability side, but it's beyond that as well. And also the fourth point is around disclosure. So this spells out need, and I've been, I suppose, a long advocate of disclosure and transparency. It's a scary place to be if you're trying to communicate your sustainability journey, because you have to be comfortable with a certain amount of unknowns, and for an organisation like NTMA, that's not really a comfortable place for us to be. But it's important to communicate, I suppose, your ambition, how you're progressing against it, and it comes back as well to our leadership role. We feel we can provide, we're doing it and being, transparent about it. We can help others on their journey. So it's
disclosure about what you're doing yourselves, as opposed to maybe imposing it on people where you would place funds.
yes,
both?
yes, well, both maybe. So when I'm talking about disclosure today, I'm really talking about, we have ICE produced its first climate report last year. We've put our climate strategy publicly online. We included sustainable metrics and climate metrics for the first time in our annual report. So it's about, I suppose, being transparent about our journey. But to your point. About, I guess, engagement. One of the, I suppose, the greatest way that NTMA can influence is really by engaging with its investors and its investees and its counterparties, and really, ensuring that sustainability and climate is part of discussions with them as well. Also, obviously, that's a key part of how we embed it.
Cathy, how closely would AIB Capital Markets interrogate its potential, if you like, business partners about how genuinely committed they are to climate change, to sustainability? Because we do hear a lot about greenwashing, and that maybe that's something that you might address.
Yeah, and I know the panel will have plenty to say around that. I mean, first of all, we take very seriously, I guess, those conversations with customers around, whether they're running a sustainable organisation and looking forward, not just today, but in 10 years' time. And even we've regulatory requirements. I was just talking to Hilary there earlier about requiring to do an assessment in all of our credit applications now for each company as to what their risks might be. So it is a very serious conversation, and one that we're all learning through, to be honest. But Irish companies are taking this very seriously, irrespective of us having the conversation with them. I think it's front and centre. It's front and centre with their stakeholders and with their employees, who are very questioning indeed themselves around it. So around the whole area of greenwashing, I guess, it's the risk that companies come out with nice statements, sort of fluffy announcements, but aren't actually doing material, really science-based movements on the ground. And it is a concern. It's a concern of, I suppose, all stakeholders nationally, and something that we're very aware of. So we're doing, a huge amount of work so that we feel we understand science-based targets. We understand. When companies set these targets, that they are real and they're stretching, but we're trying to encourage everybody, and not just, I suppose, it's all about people getting on a journey. It's not really, for us where people are today, but more or less that they set out a plan. I think that's really important.
And might there be situations or cases or projects where you would actually be pushing an open door?
Yes, but there are other things that we are saying we will not finance as well. We are making exclusion, specific exclusions around activities that we feel, are not sustainable and that we don't want them.
Do you have examples that you could share with us?
Well, I mean, I suppose hydrocarbons is an area. So we do not, we have exclusions around doing new loans to the whole hydrocarbon sector. And that may expand over time. But I think, going back to the carrot and the stick, the preference is very much more on the carrot if we can, because it's where you get enthusiasm, engagement, positivity. I think there's a huge believer in humankind to help with encouragement and energy and money behind them to solve a lot of the issues that we have out there on sustainability.
Do you want to tell us, how big is your pot that you have available to you for investment in sustainable projects? Forgive my naivety.
Yeah. I mean, our loan book today for renewable energy is around, it's approaching about 3 billion. And our ambition is for that to grow to 6+ over the next 5 years. So very, very significant. Not just in Ireland, because we couldn't deploy that amount of capital within Ireland. It is across Europe and indeed the US as well. But that's only one part of it. The other parts, as I said, encouraging all our existing customers across the agri, across manufacturing, across every sector of society. This is also very important for us. So it's not just about building renewable energy or financing renewable energy.
Emma Jane, what about the size of your pot? Can you raise them a few?
I'll meet your 3 billion. So the ISIF is, I suppose, over 9 billion of assets.
Yeah, I mean, it's there. I was looking at your website last night, and it's in particular the Ireland Strategic Investment Fund. I think the amount going, and correct me if I'm wrong, no doubt you will, towards sustainable projects is what, in the order of is it 450 billion in recent years?
So I suppose similar to Cathy's point.
Sorry, million.
We have there's about 450 million investments made in what we, I suppose, designate to be our climate positive investments. So these are investments in areas such as renewable energy, forestry, battery storage, energy efficiency. So those type of very specific kind of climate positive, it's the capital allocation piece of the pot. But it's worth saying as well that climate actually permeates all our discussions about all investments, in terms of understanding different investees positioning for a net zero transition. So climate allocation is a very significant part of it, but it does, I suppose it's a part of the discussion on everything as well.
Right. I mean, the amount there, the overall amount is well north of 10 billion. It's more probably like 15. So 450 million out of that is it, I won't say it's a small amount, but I mean, it seems to me that there's scope for a significant increase.
Absolutely, and we have an ambition to invest 1 billion over the next 5 years in this area, and what I would say as well that ISIP's mandate is to have both to drive both commercial return and achieve economic impact. And one of the ways that we measure that is actually by bringing other investors with us. So we aim to be, I suppose, a part of an investment, so bringing other capital with us. So our 450 million goes much further because we invest alongside other people. But absolutely, that's the target at the moment. I think we see there's almost there's a whole world out there of opportunity and almost an uncapped amount perhaps that could be directed towards climate at the moment.
Stephen, come in on that, because you, as you say, you're working with people in 70 different countries. Are there models, are there lessons that we can take from those that could apply here? Yes,
but there are also, those jurisdictions are also looking to Ireland to take examples of what's possible. I think the key thing, building on both, and it just happens I'm in the middle of the guys physically, but I think the key thing is, unfortunately, I don't have hundreds of millions or billions, which would be super to say that, but what we're seeing between the two people here, Sean, is that no jurisdiction at a public sector alone can afford to finance the transition. So this is about this public-private part, and this is why this actually, the RDS series is at the heart. You can see even the speakers, it's a public-private platform. And even the jurisdictions like China or the US, or the government side, cannot finance this alone. So that's kind of a key message that I'm seeing from the guys here. If I can just say maybe for a moment, if I can pivot your question, if you don't mind, Sean, back to other jurisdictions looking into Ireland and what are they learning from Ireland. So you've seen other sovereign funds in emerging markets. Look at what the NTMA did in the green bond issuance a few years ago. One of the first sovereigns in the world to do that. I can remember being involved and watching the guys on the road trip. You didn't just have the NTMA officials on the road trip going out to sell the bond. You had the Department of Finance officials and you had the Department of Climate Action officials at the time. And that was really unusual. And then also, investors saying, and forgive me, I'm Jay, but I'm listening on different panels with your colleagues, where's the money going in terms of the projects? So I'm not sure because of COVID, it may have happened this year where you're bringing a delegation in to go visit some of those projects where the capital is going. So you have emerging market jurisdictions looking back into Ireland saying, how did you do that? And I know your colleague Mark, through the Coalition of Finance Ministers, has been on many platforms explaining that. And then the last point, if I may, Sean, one of the key challenges that we have in sustainable finance is that there's a distinct lack of talent among policymakers, regulators, and market actors on this topic. These people are amazing in themselves, but we now need to layer on what is it, how do I do it, what are the products and services. And so again, the second thing that other jurisdictions are looking into Ireland is this thing called a Sustainable Finance SkillNet. And people may have come across SkillNet Ireland in the room, they're a fantastic bunch. But it's a platform which finances companies and professionals here in Ireland to upskill in sustainable finance. In 2020, when it went live, the budget was €115,000. This year, the budget is 1 million. And over the last 2 years, it's upskilled 2,400 Irish-based finance professionals in areas of sustainable finance. And they give you very technical webinars to a CFA ESG 120-hour course. And it's now going live with a new postgrad. I'm on the Indian government Sustainable Finance Task Force, and they'll have a report out in the next few weeks to say, where's India?
You said the Indian government.
Indian government. Where are they going in terms of sustainable finance? And what was great to see on their own bat, they've recognized that talent development is a key issue for them. And they found on their own bat, what's the sustainable finance skill net thing here in Ireland? So that's baked into the Indian report as a best in practice example.
That suggests, Cathy and Emma Jane, that perhaps you might have trouble or difficulty in recruiting the kind of people you need to make your policies happen, to make your projects happen.
Absolutely. I mean, as Steve and myself talk about this quite a lot. It's very difficult to recruit experienced people in this area. They're very sought after today. I know there's a course in UCD now that is snapping up graduates as they emerge. If anyone has children who are looking to pick their course, it's certainly one to think about. And the universities, I do a bit of work with Trinity, and the business school there is very much looking at its strategy going forward to include sustainability at the heart of it. We in AIB are sponsoring a new chair in sustainability in UCC Business School, and I think they're actually searching for that post as we speak. So it is certainly a challenge, and but I think there's a huge amount that we can do to educate ourselves and our teams on sustainability, which will be part of the solution as well. But yeah.
Yeah,
Emma Jane, I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, when I started in this, you could learn on the job.
Yeah.
Basically, it was certainly what I did. This area is moving at such a pace. There's such increased regulation. There's just the information is coming at a rate that is sort of never before been had. So not even just sustainability experts, but data analytics experts, a whole range of different types of skills to help navigate this area to ensure that you have good data when, I suppose, making investment decisions, but also, skills in sort of managing your portfolio going forward, assessing risk, climate risk being integrated as part of broader considerations, across portfolios. So there really is, what's interesting for me is I think often when I'm sort of recruiting for sort of current team or previous team, you really meet a lot of very interesting people from an array of different backgrounds and new courses, and it's great to see.
On the ISIF, the Ireland's Strategic Investment Fund website, there's a note, it's a crawler on the bottom of the screen saying, do you have an investment proposal that you would like to discuss with the ISIF climate team? Contact us today. Well, okay. Who are you waiting to hear from?
An array of all sorts of people, really. I think the important message is that the door is open. But in terms of our climate strategy, the types of things we're looking at, I suppose, we're very aligned with the Climate Action Plan. NTMA itself has a number of different, actions, or is listed as a key stakeholder within the Climate Action Plan. And the overarching climate strategy is really looking at, investments that help Ireland meet its 2030 targets, and then over and beyond that, technology solutions that will help meet the 2050 targets. So there's kind of an immediate focus on maybe more renewable energy efficiency type investments, and then this sort of, I suppose the important message is we're also able to take a longer term view out to 2050 that's very much aligned with how we look at the world and how we view climate investments. The door is open.
I don't know, Cathy, if you have a similar notice on your website, but I suspect the attitude may be the same.
Well, yeah, it's funny, Sean. I would say the issue at the moment is not so much the availability of finance, but the availability of projects, and that's where we need to do more work. But alongside, I think for Ireland, the other sector that screams out is around agriculture and what we can do around fostering innovation in that sector, which is so important to us nationally. And I think rather than see it as a big challenge or a big issue, we should see it as an opportunity. Yeah, rather than see it as a threat, and it is, but. I think there's big opportunities there, and we've seen, public sector doing some really good work. Teagasc, in fairness, doing great work trying to foster innovation. They've just they're in collaboration with a company co-op called Carberry down in the with a model farm, and really, trying to do good research for the whole dairy industry.
But Stephen, is there a sense though that, look, people want this transition to be relatively pain-free? To quote that famous slogan of the civil servants, what do we want? Gradual change. When do we want it? In due course. And that a similar approach has been taken by some of the farming or the agriculture interests, and maybe we don't have time for in due course.
It's why I still love Yes Minister and why I think it's still so funny, even though it was in the 80s. I used to be in the civil service, and I always loved that quote. That's very brave, Minister. I always think that's fantastic. But I do think we do have, and we're fortunate in Ireland and the democracy that we are in, that we do have some very forward-looking ministers in place. We are in a Western democracy and economy that actually does have capital and is an investable place. But as Cathy mentioned there, there is going to be pain here. As humankind, as human beings, we like to do things, as you said, are potentially pain-free. But unfortunately, if we just take a step back and look at this summer, forget about anything else before that, this summer alone, you couldn't open a newspaper any day where there wasn't a climate-related tragedy happening somewhere in the world, right? You look at Sydney, global city, but a lot of us probably have been there, 4 floods in the space of 2 years in the same area. Those houses, those people in a Western economy are now being told by insurance firms, we don't think we can insure you anymore. Right? So then you have Pakistan, and we here perhaps aren't hearing so much about the emerging economy tragedies as well. So I think what we're seeing, Sean, is we're all in this together as mankind, as humankind. We have a role to play within that. We have a role to play within the European economy. And I think what we're seeing in the last few weeks, we saw it in Holland. We saw a lot of debates, will be robust debates and protests. But the train has left the station. Fundamentally for me, I'm not in the agricultural space. I'm not looking at my family across the table and saying, what's the livelihood going to be like? So we need to recognize that. Hence the reason why I think that term just transition is a really important one, because we need to get people with us in transition. We need to be honest, we need to communicate, but we also need to show, by the way, there's capital here to support you.
I'm wondering though, and maybe this is to do more with the micro attitudes than, if you like, the kind of macro point you're making. Some of the easily remembered objectives that we have for this country is 500,000 houses retrofitted by 2030, 1 million e-cars on the road by 2030. There's a sense out there, and people are sort of saying, look, not going to happen. And does that undermine the credibility of the overall project then? Because people are sort of saying, well, no. It's not being done.
If you look at it from a fact-based perspective, it's going to be tough to hit those targets right now because of supply chain issues globally, right? So that's something that wasn't there a few years ago when the targets were set. And we're seeing factories being shut down in China right now. Even today we're reading that. So that is a challenge that perhaps needs to be factored in. You need to have the moonshot. We in the UNDP have a moonshot of 1 trillion additional between now and 2025. We feel like we can achieve that, but that's actually allowing us to really get out there and try and go for that.
1 trillion additional what?
1 trillion additional dollars in support of SDG financing over the number of next years.
Mark Carney, I think, at the COP26 talks there, was it last year, was talking about a spend of 100 trillion between now and 2050. I mean, where's all that going to come from?
Well, there's no shortage of cash. We've never been, as a society and humankind, we've never actually had so much money as we do right now. And I think what we're really beginning to see, and I think, and I see Joe Harford in the corner, and Joe was good enough to chair a committee from years ago when we were looking at a thing called the Green IFSC. Joe may remember I had a few wisps of hair at that point and was far skinnier as well. But, that's a decade in the making, right? And I would, honestly say we're only really getting going now. Now, I'm exhausted. In fact, it's kind of, as James was saying, the advocacy piece. We're only really getting going now. And I think, Sean, you were alluding to earlier on what's happened in Ukraine. The regulatory piece has left the station. Cathy's mentioned that as well from a regulatory perspective. That's more the carrot right now. But you're going to see, as more skilled people come in place, regulatory frameworks, you're going to see this whole sustainable finance and ESG agenda really get embedded into the full capital markets in a more accelerated way in the next number of years. And that will actually lead to more capital. And my final point, Sean, is the challenge we have right now is the regulatory frameworks are just being set. We have a lack of talent. We have a lack of data, inconsistent, incomparable. Those things will change in the next 2-3 years. And what that will lead to will be more products and services from the financial services institutions, which will go back to what Carney is saying is a lot of this isn't new money. It's actually potentially existing money that we actually need to push towards different investments. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, Cathy, well, we leave the audience to decide that, and maybe you'll have your question to clarify something, but makes sense to me anyway. Cathy, you were making a point to me earlier by way of email that we need to have what you call positive reinforcing circles and to avoid negative reinforcing circles. Now, translate that into plain English. What exactly is all that about?
Yeah, and I suppose it's around the carrot. It's around. So I do think 500,000 homes being retrofitted. It looks like an enormous challenge, and yet, if we could, perhaps hopefully with the aid of some public sector encouragement, be it through tax breaks for heat pumps, for instance. If we can get things going, I think, first of all, the price of heat pumps will go down over time, almost by definition, because more being produced. Also, just even tradespeople who are relatively, I don't know if anyone has tried to do it, but they're relatively inexperienced about putting in this equipment, et cetera. So that will all change, improve over time, and the cost will go down, which again will encourage, I think, more households in. So I go back to, I was involved in financing wind farms back in the early noughties, and at that time Ireland's green energy amount was something like 3 to 5% of the overall grid. And if someone had said that you would need to get to 80% by 2030, it was not believable that that's where Ireland would go to. But we're at 30 to 40% today, and we have set down a very serious target of 70 to 80% by 2030, and it's still a big challenge, but it looks more achievable. So it is amazing what you can do when you set your mind to it. But I think certainly the state is enormously helpful if it can show leadership there, and it showed leadership in relation to renewable energy. Probably in hindsight should have done more. But thank goodness it did what it did to get us to where we are today. And of course, the cost of building wind farms has reduced dramatically over that period. And the size of the wind farms that are now capable of being built has increased enormously. So offshore wind is really the big solution, I think, for renewable energy in terms of volume over the next number of years. And they can be built at scale if we can get planning and other things to fall into place. So.
Emma-Jane, you were nodding through a lot of that in agreement as opposed to...
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not accusing you of nodding off. Right? But do you sense the same kind of keenness on the part of people with projects to just, to play their part as opposed to avoid their responsibilities?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's been a significant shift, maybe even in the last 18 months. Well, you mentioned the Paris Agreement earlier, probably goes back 7 years, and now, again, it's just, I suppose it's increasing all the time. People are, I think, enthusiastic. There's an array of different types of innovation and innovative technologies, and one of the things that we certainly want to communicate is that, we are open-minded. I think we've made a lot of, I don't want to call it maybe the easier options, but some of the low-hanging fruit, some of the traditional renewable energy investments have been made, sort of with the maybe green coat renewables or some of the wind energy, onshore wind energy. But more recently, there's been a focus on battery storage, on energy efficiencies. We mentioned food and ag as well. Like, this is a sector, actually, when I talk about the 450 climate, that's not actually considering a very substantial food and ag portfolio that ISIF has as well, where climate is a significant part of the discussion with any type of investee there. And, the door is very much open on these types of discussions now in a way that it just, maybe wasn't traditionally going back a number of years ago.
Cathy, you mentioned heat pumps there, and perhaps and the price of them will come down. I mean, it's astonishing, for instance, where solar panels are concerned. I think the cost of them has fallen by about 95%, if not even more.
Yeah.
Now there may be production issues as well,
Yeah.
and perhaps human rights issues in regard to who is making them and the kind of terms and conditions that they endure. But I suppose what I wanted to ask you is, with the budget coming up now, and I suppose everybody is making their pitch, and very validly and legitimately. What about our sector? What about this need, that social need, education, all the rest of it? Are there a few things that the government could do that mightn't be that expensive that would incentivize people?
I probably go for the expensive things, Sean, to be honest. I mean, I do think a decent encouragement around retrofit, home retrofit, would really accelerate us nationally. And that's not a plug on behalf of AIB or anything like that. I just think that would be really useful. I think going back to the grid as well. As I said, we've set out that target. I do think nationally there's been question marks whether that's achievable. I think we need to, maybe not necessarily a budget issue, but a stand-back issue to say, do we really have the right conditions around planning, etc., grid connections to facilitate that? Because if it's only 8 years away at this stage. So. In terms of, maybe, I think we could perhaps with businesses encourage them to start the journey. So we're trying to pilot with relatively small SMEs energy audits that they can do. And actually the take-up hasn't been huge so far. I think people are a little bit afraid, maybe, oh God, okay, I do an energy audit and it's going to say certain things and I won't have the money to invest and it's a difficult climate. So perhaps there's encouragements that we can give, tax incentives to the SME sector to get started, because I think getting started is 90% of the battle, actually.
Jane, Stephen was talking about public-private partnerships. Now, I suppose you really you're at the interface there, because you're working with an agency that has a lot of independence, a lot of money to invest as well, and at the same time you are interacting. And you've got, I think, is it 2 departmental secretaries on your board of directors?
Yeah.
So you're in a position to, sort of, if you like, channel a lot of ideas, thoughts, information, advice. I mean, what are the kind of things you're saying to, if you like, the policy makers? Because I think you said to me before, you're a policy taker more than a policy maker.
Yes, it's a very important NTMA line. We're policy takers and not policy makers. But like that, we have a commercial objective, that's sort of fundamental to the NTMA in terms of how it manages the assets and liabilities, and also provides advice to various either semi-states or ministers or projects as appropriate. We always have our commercial hat on, which means that we're always, I suppose, we have a big network, from as a sovereign fund that was traditionally invested globally. We have a significant sovereign fund network. We've a significant network of international managers. We've probably connected with all sorts of different types of advisors and banks, and really we've always taken this sort of long-term view. You're looking at the market. You're looking at I suppose horizon planning, managing risk within a portfolio, which forces us to think long-term. So always delivering, I guess, that message. While we're invested domestically, so the ISAF has a mandate to invest in Ireland to achieve commercial, return and economic impact. But we can't do that by focusing solely domestically. We need to be thinking internationally and bringing best practice to play. Probably a good example actually is a recent partnership with Just Climate, which is a generation investment manager fund, which is, I suppose, internationally based, but is looking at bringing technologies. Through that partnership, we hope to be bringing and investing in technologies that will help, I suppose, deliver, significant climate impact for Ireland's transition. And that's the kind of message that we bring to the table, is that we can bring together different partnerships and maybe make things happen where there might not be capital available, or maybe take a longer view on things as well.
And how do you avoid a situation whereby yourselves, people like AIB, capital markets, or regular commercial lending, and the IDA, how do you avoid tripping over each other?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, a very important, I suppose, we don't want to replicate the role of anybody else. One of the key principles of our mandate is that of additionality, that we're bringing something different to the table. We're very much, we're very closely engaged, across the spectrum of different public sector bodies. We're talking to everybody. We're not operating in isolation. Engagement, as I mentioned, is one of our key pillars. So it's really really about, I suppose, communicating, understanding, I suppose, all of our different roles and how they interact together.
And we would co-invest in equity funds together, actually, on
Absolutely.
things, Sean,
Yeah,
particularly around sustainability. So.
Yeah.
On that note of unison, it's been my honour and privilege to listen to you all, Cathy, Stephen and Emma Jane. And if I don't invite Gillian back to the platform, I'll be in trouble with Joe Duffy's producer. Thank you all.
Thank you to the panel on what has been a really thought-provoking, and for me, who has worked in both these agencies that are represented on the panel, encouraging, because the debate has moved so far in a very short number of years, and these people are at the front of addressing that. I think we can see from here this could be a much longer debate, and I think we're ultimately just scratching the surface on the discussion that will be need to be had to align public, private and international financial initiatives to drive the quantum of finance that will need to be delivered, not just to bring projects, but also to Stephen's earlier point about a just transition and bringing everyone with us. So I think it's key that this discussion continues. And I think obviously the current economic shock as it's evolving from energy security, the consideration we're all having about the economic impact on ourselves, both in the short and the medium term, and the longer term view of how we can sustain how we work and live, are going to be key to how we think in the future. I think it will be the defining challenge of the next decade, this decade, and probably for decades to come. And ultimately, we need to find solutions in bringing and enabling the change that is required. The RDS Vision series is going to continue to look at sectors that will enable that change, so that we can have a real discussion on what's needed and where the gaps exist. So with that, I'd like to thank our expert panel, Cathy, Stephen, Emma Jane and Sean, and thank you all for being here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.